トビデオ
Oh, mercy, this possum has been working like a dog these past few months. I need to refresh myself before I wreck myself. Enough of these massive video projects for the time being. I need something simple. Something easy I can talk about for 20 minutes without needing to download and render gigabytes worth of footage. In other words, it's time to bring out old reliable and look at obscure OVAs from the 1980s. And for this go around, we're dropping by on some old friends we haven't visited with in a while. Hello ladies, been quite some time, eh? For those of you who just got here, Gall Force was one of the first collaborations between anime studios AIC and Artmic. Released in 1986, it's all about an endless war between two alien races, the all-female humanoid Solnoids and the all-male amoeba-like Paranoids. The focus is on a singular crew of Solnoids who all get slowly picked off either through the war or the plot of Alien happening in their cargo hold. And one thing leads to another, and it ends with all but one of the Solnoid crew dead and flying to safety on an uninhabited planet with a male Solnoid Paranoid hybrid. That planet being Earth, and them being the first male and female human beings by which the entire human race is descended from. Not the most groundbreaking science fiction story, but it's entertaining pulpy nonsense that there was plenty of in the 80s OVA sphere. So naturally, they turned this into a trilogy, with the following two installments being about another crew of Solnoids having to defend said planet as the war between the two races has reached its final self-eliminating phase. After some space battles and lengthy exposition scenes, both the second Solnoid crew and the rest of the Solnoids and Paranoids perish, but not before the former save the soon-to-be planet Earth and sending off a pod that contains the Solnoid race's history and technology, with hopes that the race that came after them will do better than they did. This is a series that could have ended at the first installment. It's a bittersweet ending, but shows that hope for the future still lives on. But they decided to keep going in the name of the Almighty Aller. Like the first installment, the endings to 2 and 3 were bittersweet, but still showed that there was hope for a race that can still do better than its precursors. At this point, with 2 similar yet separate groups of principal cast dead, and 3 endings that mostly arrive at the same conclusion, there's nothing the Gall Force franchise can do at this point without sounding like it's repeating itself. To which I say, you fools!
人類ある限り永久に繰り返されるであろう創造と破壊の中にあり今また明日のための戦いが始まる。
In the not-so-distant future, next Sunday AD, we find ourselves on planet Earth, which has seen better days, you see. Due to an arms race between Eastern and Western powers, the world has been flooded with armed robots and cyborg super soldiers who have turned against their masters. Under the command of their V8 engine-shaped god leader, the killing machines desire to exterminate humanity so that they can take their place as the superior successors. Well, the human race is not going out without a fight, as what's left of humanity's military has formed pockets of resistance to act as the vanguard for the surviving civilian populace who live among Earth's ruined cities. Among these troops are young women who resemble their Solnoid precursors. With a robot army closing in, the leaders of each side of the military decide to come together to launch what remains of humanity into space so that they may reach their base on Mars and find a more stable, robot-free existence. But the killing machines outnumber the army considerably, and it's difficult to say whether the mission will be a success when old tensions between East and West threaten to be reignited.
今までの遺恨もいくつかはあるでしょう。でも今この時こそ力を合わせるべきだわ。私たちゲリラがいがみ合っていることは敵にとって有利なことを皆さんも分かっているはずでしょ。
Released just a year after the last installment, Stardust War, 1989's Rhea Gall Force is a new chapter in the Gall Force franchise. Literally, the first 3 installments of the Gall Force series are filed under the moniker of the Space Chapters. Now, with the fourth entry in the series, we have the beginning of what is known as the Earth chapters. And despite looking like old familiar characters, the anime makes it clear that this is a completely different cast in a completely different setting, dealing with a completely different threat. But it also seems to continue the themes introduced in the previous Gall Force franchise, as well as having a similar focus on Hollywood-inspired action. This leads to an interesting question. Does a change of scenery and genre suit the Gall Force franchise, and is it enough to keep with the themes of endless war being the path of self-destruction before it becomes stale? Well, grab yourself a plate of expired cat food and season it with some delicious gunpowder, kids, because we're going down to Earth to see what is up with Rhea Gall Force.
もう逃げないわよ。
Before I dive into the anime proper, let's take a look at the people who are putting forth the money to make Gall Force an annualized OVA franchise. It's your usual suspects for 80s anime OVA outings, namely the publishing company Movec and their anime merchandising arm Animates. But the big dog that was really footing the bill for the Gall Force franchise was this little mom and pop operation called Sony, specifically their music division. Formed as a joint international venture between Sony and American company CBS in the 60s, they were the primary producer of records, cassettes, and CDs in Japan in the 1980s. They were also venturing into the realm of video software, helping distribute OVAs in films like Vampire Hunter D, Crystal Triangle, and the Dankuga OVAs. With the growing home video market, Sony was dipping their beak in any format they could get their hands on, starting with their homegrown Betamax before settling with rivals JVC's own VHS format when that became the default. By 1989, the home video market had grown massively over the course of the decade, so much so that OVAs were no longer regarded as premium anime. When OVAs first started out, they were seen as these big budget productions that people would pay big budget prices on. The price for the average volume of an original anime could run about $12,000 per volume. That's around $80 to $100 in today's money. Titles like Megazone 23 and Fight Exor 1 were luxury items, and often depended on the rental market more often than not. But as VCRs became more plentiful thanks to lower manufacturing costs and market saturation, the global home video industry switched up to becoming less about the rental markets and more about the direct markets. Turns out, selling more tapes at a cheaper price was more lucrative than selling fewer tapes at rental market prices. By 1988, the price for OVA volumes went from an average 12,000 yen to 5,000 yen, around $35 in today's money. This is the environment that helped the OVA boom keep on booming. One early success story of this new environment was Headgear's Mobile Police Patlabor OVA. Their affordable volumes and quick turnaround ensure sales gave the franchise a big budget movie and TV series within a year of the first volume's release. Having just come off producing Stardust War, Sony wanted more milk from the cow, and it's not like AIC or Artmic were in any position to refuse. This being in the aftermath of the ambitious Bubblegum Crisis OVA having to be left unfinished, so the studios needed to take any steady work that was offered to them. The crew for Rhea Gall Force would largely be the same as Stardust War. Kazuhiro Akiyama would return as director, as would Hideki Kakinuma as screenwriter, Nobuyuki Kitajima as animation director, and Kenichi Sonoda as character designer. Judging from the crew, it honestly felt like it was the plan all along to have an Earth chapter set up. But Sony was expecting more out of this production than Eternal Story, Destruction, or Stardust War. Since the copies for Rhea Gall Force were going to go for much cheaper, Sony expected that it would sell twice as much than the previous outings. So, no pressure, fellas. Looking at the anime itself though, I think it would have helped Sony more if they weren't as stingy with opening up their wallets. The Gall Force franchise wasn't that much of a gigantic showcase of awesome animation like so many of its peers of the era, but it did have enough of a budget for some eye-grabbing space battles and special effects. However, by the time Stardust War rolled around, they really only had enough to focus only on the explosions those space battles generated, enough to distract the audience from the fact that most of the war is devoted to a group of girls having conversations in a dark room in front of a supercomputer. With Rhea, Sony's purse strings haven't loosened all that much. It still looks competently made at first glance, but you really do notice that the boarding is a lot stiffer than its predecessors. And while I know post-apocalyptic wastelands are the default 80s anime setting after space and futuristic cities, it all feels standard, as if art director Mitsuhara Miyamai was copying off stolen Hokuto no Ken backdrops. Though I don't want to blame them, it was going to be an uphill battle regardless. The series was going to lose something in transit once things went from space down to a terrestrial level. But that doesn't mean Rhea is a total slideshow. Those explosions are animated really good, and the battles between conventional human weaponry and superpowered super intelligent robots are the most visually captivating parts of the anime. The machines were clearly man-made but still have a biological alien design to them. They are genuine juggernauts that cannot be reasoned with. Humanity is throwing everything at them, and it takes an entire armory just to make one of them explode into a pile of Nickelodeon gag. No wonder plan A at this point is to get the bulk of humanity off of Earth. Running is the best option at this point. Be warned though, this is the 80s and children have yet to electric soldier Porygon themselves into the hospital. Those robot laser effects are a lawsuit waiting to happen these days, hence that warning I put up at the beginning. Keeping with consistency throughout the series, all the voice actors from the previous films returned to voice their respective doppelgangers. In the Japanese version at least. For the dub, Central Park Media decided to actually cast their A-list players of the time like Veronica Taylor, Deborah Rabbi, and Dan Green in the roles. Although, that makes little difference since, like in the previous entries, voice direction is non-existent.
Good job commanding today, Sandy.
The original Japanese track is clearly the superior option, but it does create a problem if you actually did watch the Space Chapter films like I did. While these characters look, sound, and act like the characters they were from previous movies, they aren't actually the characters they were from the previous movies, which, no doy, but it really does create a dissonance when you're mostly familiar with their previous versions and then they introduce themselves with a completely different name. Like, no, your name is not Score, your name is Luffy. You're the same beautiful butch soldier voiced by Hiromi Suru as you were in the last 3 movies. But whatever, that's just my itty bitty nitpick. All these characters practically being the same as their Space Chapter doppelgangers means jack squat in the overall story. If anything, you could say that this is the anime equivalent of Dark Souls reusing character models between games, a simple cost-saving measure that's given the barest in-universe justification for. Speaking of story, what's all that about? Well, if you were invested in the through-line narrative of Gall Force, you might be a little bummed at the story even existing in the first place. The Space Chapter spent 3 volumes emphasizing that planet Earth is the place where the last of the Solenoid race is pinning all their hopes and dreams on for a race that will be better than they were. Do not make the same mistakes that they did and sow the seeds for their own destruction. Well, guess what humanity did?
End of the world. Man, those death metal album covers got it shockingly right.
And the best part is that it's technically the Solenoid's fault. You know how the ending of Stardust War is our heroes launching a pod that contains the entire Solenoid's history and technology and having it land on the moon? Humanity eventually found that pod, and the first thing they did with it is start creating state-of-the-art military hardware with that technology. And since this was during the not Cold War, both Eastern and Western powers got in an arms race with each other to see who could create the biggest and baddest killing machines on the face of the Earth, until those super intelligent robots eventually decided to turn their iron sights towards all those squishy humans ordering them around. Good job! You may have backed the wrong horse on this one, ladies. This is how the Gall Force franchise continues with its themes of a dying race trying to find hope amidst a long, fruitless conflict. Of course, it's a complete bummer with how the premise alone drops trowel and takes a dump on all the hopeful endings of the past chapters.
When they evolve a civilization and are able to reach chaos on their own and find it, hopefully they'll be advanced and responsible enough to understand what it means.
No. At the same time though, I think it does handle a lot of what it's throwing down pretty well. Like I said in the animation portion, Rhea does an excellent job at showing how helpless this entire conflict really is. The humans, even with all their weapons and all their armies at their disposal, are still outnumbered and outgunned by the robot menace. And even when it seems like they have made a dent in their operations, it always comes at a great cost. Seen at the beginning where our heroes take down a mecha patrol seemingly with ease, only to return to their garrison and find out their reserve squadron has been totally slaughtered while they were away.
ねえ しちゃったの？ねえみんな、嘘でしょ？ねえ。
And even united against a common enemy in the face of Armageddon, it's made clear that the conflicts between Eastern and Western powers have yet to truly fade. The war between the two powers that caused the apocalypse in the first place is still a recent memory. Even with humanity's future at stake, this is still a very uneasy alliance that is being made, and the wounds suffered in the aforementioned war are still fresh and bleeding.
大戦で私の両親は西側の兵士に殺された。あんたらと手を組むくらいならロボット軍団と手を組んだ方がマシよ。
Rhea does just enough with the central tenet of the series to make it a more layered conflict, something it really pulls off by the end by making it probably the most openly hopeful entry. Sandy's unit sees that a group of Eastern forces are pinned down with some civilians and risk life and limb to help them get to the rockets, all of which launch with no interference, giving a very profound final scene of the soldiers looking at the fleets of space shuttles heading off into space, knowing that, even though they are meant to stay behind and fight a hopeless battle, they can rest easy knowing that they've given what remains of humanity a second chance among the stars. It really does make for a more complex version of the conflict that defined the space chapters. That one didn't even have a proper cause for why the Solnoids and Paranoids are locked in a forever war. Here, the explanation gives more depth to humanity's struggle, both with the robots and each other, and it shows that it takes more than just a common goal to actually come together towards a shared goal. With all that said, Rhea does lose some of its complexity when you look closer at the story and examine its threads. A big problem that the space chapters has is that the characters, despite being beautifully designed, are all one note. They all have one characteristic that defines their personalities, and sometimes they're not even given that. Even with these characters thrown into a different setting and situation, they remain static. Rumi was the flighty cute comic relief who's always eating, so her Earth version is also a flighty cute comic relief who's always seen eating. And in some cases, it feels like the characters get even more simplified. Luffy had an entire trilogy spanning arc where she comes to grips that she's more than just a super soldier who's only good at following orders. But with her Earth equivalent score, she doesn't get that much character beyond being a piss and vinegar fueled commando, and the only real change between her and her space chapter self is a bigger hairdo.
もっと早く歩けねえのか。こんなとこ座れたらイチコロだぜ。
And it's not like Rhea lacked for opportunities to give these characters depth. A big part of Sandy's character is that her father was the one who discovered the Solnoid pod and, indirectly, helped bring the downfall of humanity. You would think that would be an immense source of angst for her, and it is for a bit, enough to weave exposition into the story, but you never feel that Sandy's harboring any real pain over that. Nobody condemns her for the sins of her father, nor does she ever feel like she has to redeem herself to make up for her father's legacy. All it is just backstory filler that only comes into play when Sandy tells her comrade Melody, who's leaving with the citizenry, to give a message from her father to the Mars Command. What's in that message? We don't know. I guess we're just saving that for the sequel. Really, what holds Rhea Gall Force back is so many wasted opportunities to make this anime more than it actually is. We have a character who is one of the few cyborg super soldiers who stayed loyal to the human cause, and his role is mostly to be Score's near-silent sidekick. Rhea Gall Force is a big change for the series, but the only real change is taking the pitch from Sonoda-designed anime girls in Alien/Star Wars to Sonoda-designed girls in the opening scene of Terminator. Apart from that, the staff seems to be unable or unwilling to go outside their comfort zones aside from building on already established themes. But still, Rhea Gall Force is competent enough to not be boring. 80s anime girls with guns is still 80s anime girls with guns, so who am I to look a gift horse in the mouth? Unfortunately, the change in scenery did not result in the lucrative sales that Sony was hoping for, and they would end up handing off producer duties to another company. But we'll get to that story in due time. For the time being, keep the ammunition dry. We'll be seeing these girls again sometime in the future. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video or want to support this channel, please donate to my Patreon. Each dollar can give you early access to my videos as they come out, as well as keep the channel running a bit more smoothly. You can also subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, or just like this video. Either way, you'll be helping me out. That's all for now. See you for the next round of tapes.